Chapter 9. The next 3 days blended together in a way that felt new and unfamiliar. No sharp edges, no countdowns, just a steady unfolding. That, Jonah realized, was the real test. When things stopped feeling urgent, did people still show up? At the ranch, Lena noticed the shift first in the kitchen. Meals no longer felt like events to be survived. People lingered. Conversations stretched past the last bite. Someone fixed a loose hinge without being asked. Another person restocked grain they hadn't used. These were small things, but systems were made of small things done without fear. Eli spent his mornings moving between crews, not because anyone told him to, but because people sought him out. A question about wiring turned into a conversation about planning. Planning turned into teaching. Teaching turned into confidence on both sides. He caught himself correcting a measurement, then laughing when the correction wasn't needed. The trust felt strange, like wearing new shoes that actually fit. Nora's world expanded quietly. She learned the names of adults who used to blur together. She learned where to go if she felt scared, bored, or curious. One afternoon, she sat with Rhea, watching numbers scroll across the screen. Is this how money works here? Nora asked. This is how we watch it, Rhea replied. Money behaves better when it knows it's being observed. Nora nodded solemnly, filing that away like a rule of nature. At the town by the river, the group held their first meeting without Jonah. It wasn't smooth. People talked over one another. Old habits surfaced. But something had changed. No one walked out. They stayed until it made sense. Inez left the hall late that night, tired but steady, realizing she hadn't felt alone in a room like that in decades. In the city based group, Ria's guidance echoed through headsets and shared documents. The digital team rebuilt their schedules, protecting rest the same way they protected revenue. One member admitted quietly that it was the first time work hadn't felt like a slow collapse. Back at the ranch, a disagreement surfaced over expansion. Some wanted to move faster, others wanted to stabilize longer. The conversation could have split the room. Instead, Jonah asked one question: what breaks if we're wrong? The answer slowed everyone down. They chose patience, not fearfully, but deliberately. That night, Eli walked the fence line the way Lena used to. He watched the lights glow steadily, each one powered by something the community owned together. He thought about how close his life had come to disappearing into statistics no one read. Inside, Nora slept with a book open on her chest, fingers still marking a place she planned to return to. On the wall, the map continued to fill, not dramatically, not loudly, just enough to notice that no dot stood alone anymore. The 3 days passed without crisis, and that more than anything felt revolutionary, because for the first time nothing needed to be saved. It was simply being lived. Chapter 10. The request didn't come with confidence. It came with apology. We tried the calls, the message said. We read everything you sent, but people here, they don't believe it's real unless someone stands next to them while it's happening. Jonah read it twice, then closed his notebook. He already knew the answer. Some people don't need instructions, they need presence. The community they traveled to sat on the edge of everything: edge of the city, edge of employment, edge of patience. Buildings leaned the way people did when they were tired of holding themselves up. The group waiting for them didn't look skeptical so much as empty, like hope had become too expensive to risk again. A man named Caleb met them at the door. His hands shook when he spoke. We don't need ideas, he said. We need someone to stay. Jonah nodded. That's why we're here. The first days weren't productive by any normal measure. Nothing scaled, nothing optimized. They cooked together, cleaned together, fixed one broken door slowly, explaining each step twice if needed. People asked the same questions over and over, not because they didn't hear the answer, but because they didn't trust it yet. What happens if I mess this up? One woman asked while learning to prep food for the week. Then we fix it, Lena said. Together. She said it every time until it stopped sounding like reassurance and started sounding like fact. Eli paired with a young man who hadn't kept a schedule in years. They didn't start with work. They started with waking up at the same time every day. Coffee, one task, then rest. The second week, they added a second task. By the third, the man stopped asking what came next. His body remembered before his mind did. This isn't teaching, Eli realized one night. It's rewiring. Yes, Jonah said. Routine is safety when chaos was normal. Some of the people there needed more than guidance. They needed someone beside them while they made decisions, small ones that had once carried catastrophic consequences. Budgeting wasn't numbers, it was trauma. Planning ahead felt like tempting fate. So the mentor stayed, every day, not hovering, not rescuing, walking alongside, showing up at the same time, doing the same things, letting stability soak in slowly, the way hunger once had. By the fourth week, something shifted. Arguments shortened. Meals happened on time. One person started reminding another what day it was. Someone else cleaned without being asked. By the sixth week, laughter appeared, careful at first, like it might be punished. Caleb pulled Jonah aside near the end of the second month. They're different, he said quietly. So am I. Jonah watched the group from a distance, people moving with purpose instead of panic. You didn't need saving, he said. You needed time inside a system that didn't abandon you. When they finally prepared to leave, the group didn't panic. That was how Jonah knew it had worked. A woman hugged Lena and said, I hear your voice in my head now when things go sideways. Lena smiled. Good. That's the goal. Eventually, it becomes your own. On the drive back, Eli stared out the window. Remote works for some, he said, but not for people this hurt. Jonah nodded. When someone's been lost long enough, stability has to be modeled daily until it becomes normal. The map would grow slower this way, fewer places at once, more time per community. But the roots would go deeper. And this time, no one would be left behind just because they needed someone to walk with them a little longer. Chapter 11. When they returned, the ranch felt different. Not because it had changed, but because they had. 2 months of walking beside people who flinched at stability rewired something in all of them. Jonah noticed it first in the quiet. He listened longer, spoke less. Presence had sharpened his sense of timing. The community gathered that first evening, not for updates, not for celebration, but because everyone could feel there was something new to understand. We learned a limit, Jonah said simply. Not a failure, a truth. People leaned in. Some communities can learn by reading, some by watching, some by trying and correcting, but some, he paused, choosing his words carefully, some need to live inside stability long enough for their bodies to believe it's real. Lena added, that takes time, 2 months minimum, daily, same people, same rhythm. Murmurs spread, not in resistance, but in recognition. Many of them had needed that once. Rhea spoke next. This means we don't scale like a company. We scale like a mentorship network. That reframed everything. The next 3 days were spent redesigning, not the core system, but how it traveled. The blueprint stayed intact, but a new layer formed around it. Embedded mentors. People who didn't just teach the system, but temporarily became part of it wherever they went. Eli volunteered without hesitation. I know what it's like to need someone there every day. He said, I can do that. Nora watched him from across the room, understanding more than anyone realized. Training the mentors became the focus. Not technical skills, they already had those, but emotional endurance. How to stay consistent without controlling, how to guide without rescuing, how to model routine without becoming indispensable. If they depend on you, Lena said, we failed. So we teach ourselves to fade, Rhea replied. They practiced it at the ranch. Newer members were paired with mentors who slowly stepped back as routines held. It worked. Confidence grew without collapse. Meanwhile, messages arrived from other places, some thriving, some struggling, some asking for in person help. For the first time, the response wasn't automatic yes. Jonah wrote back carefully, we can come, but we will stay. And you must be willing to walk every day with us. Some didn't reply. Some did. Those were the ones ready. On the third night, Eli sat with Nora outside, stars scattered wide above them. I might be gone sometimes, he said gently. She nodded, but you'll come back. Yes, she thought for a moment. You're teaching people how not to be scared of tomorrow. Eli smiled. I guess I am. Inside, the map changed again. Not just dots now, but lines showing time stepped, built, roots sunk deep enough to hold. The world wasn't fixed faster, it was fixed truer. And for the first time, they understood that real wealth didn't just spread, it stayed. Chapter 12. No one could point to the exact moment it became many places instead of one idea. It happened the way forests grow, slowly at the edges and visibly beneath the surface, until one day you realized the ground itself had changed. At the ranch, morning still began the same. Food was prepared, systems checked, people greeted by name. Stability remained boring on purpose. But now, every morning also began with updates. Not frantic, not urgent, just steady reports from elsewhere. A town waking up together 3 time zones away. A city block organizing its first shared budget. A river community checking water levels and crop yields like it mattered, because it did. The map on the wall had transformed. It was no longer just dots. Each place now carried a symbol beside it: how long mentors stayed, which systems were running independently, which still needed daily presence. The map told a story of patience. Jonah stood before it with Rhea and Lena, coffee cooling in his hand. "We're not growing fast," Rhea said. "We're growing right," Lena replied. In the river town, Inez led the morning circle without thinking about it anymore. People arrived on time, not out of obligation, but expectation. Food systems were stable now. A construction co op had taken its first external contract. When an argument broke out over expansion, it ended the same way it had at the ranch, with one question: what breaks if we're wrong? The answer slowed them just enough to choose well. Caleb's community, the one that had needed 2 full months of daily presence, was quieter now, but stronger. Their routines held even after the mentors left. One man who had once needed reminders just to show up now walked the space each morning, checking on others. He didn't call it leadership. He called it making sure nothing slips. In the city based group, RIA's digital systems had become a lifeline for several places at once: shared accounting, transparent pay formulas, rotating workloads that prevented collapse. They met weekly, screens filled with faces that once would have been competitors. Now they were collaborators. "Stability is our product," one of them said during a call. "Revenue follows it." At another site, newer, smaller, a group struggled. Food distribution lagged. Tension rose. Instead of letting it fester, they requested in person help. Eli arrived with 2 others, not with answers, but with consistency. They cooked together, worked together, rebuilt the rhythm from the ground up. "This feels slower than failing," someone complained during the first week. Eli smiled gently. "That's how you know it's working." Back at the ranch, Nora sat with other kids, tracing lines between the places on a smaller version of the map. "They're all connected," she said, as if stating something obvious. "Yes," Lena replied, "but none of them depend on each other to survive." That was the rule that protected everything. As weeks passed, something unexpected happened. Communities began helping each other without asking the ranch. A food surplus rerouted. A construction crew traveled to assist after a storm. Digital teams absorbed overflow work from places still finding their footing. Jonah noticed and said nothing. That too was part of letting go. One evening, representatives from several places gathered at the ranch, not as leaders, but as equals. They sat at long tables, sharing meals, stories, mistakes. No one spoke about saving the world. They talked about sleep, about not panicking at bills, about children laughing without checking faces first, about earning enough to plan a future. "This is what rich feels like," someone said quietly. No one argued. Later that night, Jonah stood alone by the map. It no longer felt like a project. It felt like a responsibility being carried correctly. Not centralized, not controlled, just held steady. The world outside still struggled, governments still failed, markets still extracted. But in these places, spread wide, rooted deep, people were eating, building, healing, and earning real incomes without destroying each other to do it. That was how change actually happened. Not all at once, not loudly, but everywhere it was needed most. The gathering didn't end when the plates were cleared. It softened into smaller conversations, pairs and trios drifting toward firelight, porches, quiet corners where truth came out easier. This was always the moment Jonah watched for, the hour when people stopped performing success and started admitting what still scared them. A woman from the river town spoke first. "I'm afraid it only works because you're here," she said, staring into her cup. Jonah shook his head slowly. "You're afraid because for the first time something is working. That's different." She let that settle. Nearby, a man from the city group argued gently with Caleb about expansion. "If we grow too slow, people suffer longer," he said. And if we grow too fast, Caleb replied, we create new versions of the same harm. They didn't resolve it. They didn't need to. The system allowed disagreement without fracture. That alone felt revolutionary. As the night deepened, stories crossed boundaries. A farmer learned accounting tricks from a coder. A teenager explained scheduling apps to someone twice her age. People who would never have met in the old world now spoke a shared language. Stability first, income second, dignity always. Jonah walked the perimeter, listening. He heard someone say, I don't wake up bracing anymore. Another, my hands stop shaking. Another quieter, I think I'm allowed to want more now. That one stayed with him. The next morning, representatives met again, not as a council, but as a workshop. They laid out what each place was doing: food, housing, work, mentorship, and where friction still lived. No one hid failures. There was no benefit to pretending. Rhea drew a simple shape on the board, a circle with lines branching outward. Each place stays self sustaining, she said. But mentors move, skills move, capital moves slowly and transparently. Not extraction, someone added. Circulation, Rhea nodded. They mapped it in real time, where surplus flowed, where time was the real shortage, where 2 months of presence changed everything, and where a single visit was enough. The system breathed as they adjusted it, not brittle, not rigid. By afternoon, a realization surfaced that none of them had named yet. We're not building one model, Lena said finally. We're building a way of learning. That reframed the map again. Not locations now, but stages. Emergency stabilization, routine formation, income reliability, local leadership, mentor release. People don't get stuck, Eli said. They move through. And some move back, Nora added from the doorway, when they need help again. No one laughed. It was true. As the gathering prepared to disperse, there were no speeches, just quiet commitments. Dates set, mentors assigned, return visits planned and unplanned alike. When the last vehicle pulled away, the ranch felt vast again. Jonah stood where the map used to feel overwhelming and now felt manageable. Lena joined him. You realize this never ends, she said. He nodded. It's not supposed to. She smiled, tired but certain. Then let's make sure it stays human. Jonah looked at the wall one last time before turning off the lights. The map didn't promise salvation. It promised something rarer, a way forward that didn't abandon people once they were finally standing. And that, he knew, was enough to change everything. The quiet after everyone left was different this time. It wasn't emptiness. It was space. The kind that meant something had been set in motion and no longer required constant pushing. Jonah woke early the next morning, before the sun fully reached the fields. He walked the paths alone, listening to the place breathe. In the distance, generators hummed softly. Gardens stirred. A few early risers moved through routine without instruction. That was always the sign. When systems ran even when no one was watching. By mid-morning, messages began arriving. Not requests, not praise, but observations. We handled our first conflict without calling you. Income held steady this week. We trained 2 new mentors internally. Jonah forwarded them to the shared board without commentary. Let the facts speak. Later, the core group gathered again, not formally, just drawn together by habit. Coffee, notebook, silence before words. Rhea broke it first. There's a pattern, she said. Places stabilize faster once they host another group, even briefly. Because they see themselves as capable, Lena replied. Teaching confirms identity. Eli leaned back. Then maybe hosting is the final stage, not exporting mentors, receiving peers. They let that settle. It was subtle but powerful. Instead of always sending help outward, communities could become temporary anchors for others. No hierarchy, no ownership. Nora scribbled in her notebook. Like constellations, she said, not a ladder. Jonah smiled. Exactly, no top, just connection. That afternoon, a call came in from a place none of them had expected. Dense, overwhelmed, historically resistant to outside help. The voice on the other end was guarded. We don't want charity, the caller said. Good, Jonah replied. Neither do we. There was a pause. Then, can you stay? Jonah looked around the table. No one hesitated. We can, he said. But we'll walk with you by not ahead of you. When the call ended, no one rushed to plan. They had learned that haste broke things. Instead, they listed what had to be present before they went. Daily mentors, food stability, income scaffolding, emotional support. This is heavier, Eli said quietly. Yes, Lena answered, but it's what the system is for. As dusk fell, Jonah returned to the map, not to add a dot but to adjust lines. Some grew thicker, some faded as places stood fully on their own. It felt less like expansion and more like pruning, shaping growth so it wouldn't collapse under its own weight. He thought of the early days when the idea of helping everyone sounded naive. Now it sounded precise. Help didn't mean saving, it meant staying long enough for routine to replace fear. It meant income that didn't require harm. It meant dignity becoming boring again. That night, Jonah wrote one line in his notebook and underlined it twice. We don't scale people, we stabilize them. Outside, the ranch settled into sleep. Far away, other places did too. Some because of the system, some because they were learning to build it themselves. The chapter wasn't ending, it was widening. By the fourth morning after the gathering, the work took on a quieter tone, less invention, more listening. Jonah noticed that when systems reached this stage, the loudest ideas were usually the wrong ones. The right moves were small and almost invisible. A mentor returned early from one of the newer sites and asked to speak privately. They don't need us every hour anymore, she said, but they panic when we leave entirely. Jonah nodded. Then don't leave. Change the shape. They adjusted again. Instead of full departure, mentors began stepping into predictable absences. Gone one day, present the next, then 2 days gone. Absence became part of the training. Stability didn't disappear when the mentor did, and people learned that firsthand. At another site, something different happened. A group refused mentorship altogether. We've been controlled before, they said. We don't want anyone directing us. Jonah listened carefully. Then don't accept mentors, he replied. Accept mirrors. They paired the group with another community at the same stage. Not more advanced, not behind, just parallel. Weekly calls, shared problem solving, no authority. Progress came slower, but it came clean. The system was learning how to meet people where they actually were, not where theory said they should be. Back at the ranch, younger members began asking harder questions. How do we stop this from becoming power? One asked. You don't, Lena answered honestly. You design it so power can't concentrate. They showed them the safeguards again: transparent finances, rotating roles, capped decision authority, mandatory rest cycles. No one could hold control long enough to abuse it. Leadership existed, but it moved. Jonah watched the younger ones absorb that. This was how the future stayed intact, by teaching the next generation to distrust systems that relied on heroes. One evening, as the sun sank low, Caleb called from his community. We hit a wall, he said. Old habits surfaced. A few people want to rush expansion. What are you doing? Jonah asked. We slowed everything, even income growth. Jonah smiled. Good. Stability before scale. Caleb exhaled audibly. It's strange. Slowing down feels like success now. That's because it is. As weeks passed, the language across all places began to align. Not slogans, but shared instincts. When pressure rose, people paused instead of pushing. When conflict appeared, they widened the circle instead of narrowing it. When someone struggled, they didn't isolate them or fix them, they walked. The world outside still measured success in speed and size. Inside these communities, success looked like consistency. Jonah realized something then that hadn't been obvious before. This wasn't a movement people joined. It was a way people recovered their time, recovered their confidence, recovered their ability to imagine a future without bracing for impact. Late one night, Nora found Jonah writing again. Are you documenting everything? She asked. No, he said. Just enough so it doesn't get lost. She sat beside him. Do you think it really reaches everyone someday? Jonah thought carefully. Not all at once, but wherever it reaches, it changes what people expect. And expectations spread faster than systems. She nodded, satisfied. Outside, lights glowed in buildings that once felt temporary and now felt lived in. Somewhere far away, a mentor was walking beside someone through their third week of routine. Somewhere else, a community was making its first decisions without fear. The chapter kept moving, not forward, not outward, but deeper. Understood. We stay inside the days. No skipping, no drifting, continuing the same chapter, moment by moment. That same night, Jonah didn't sleep. Not from anxiety, clarity. the kind that keeps your mind alert because it knows something fragile is forming and timing matters. He stepped outside just past midnight. Lights were still on in 3 buildings. Someone laughed softly near the kitchen. A generator hiccuped, then steadied. None of it felt accidental anymore. Lena joined him without speaking at first. She leaned against the rail, watching the dark. "They're still awake," she said. "Yes," Jonah answered. "That means they're thinking." Inside the main hall, a small group sat around a table that had become unofficially theirs. No authority granted it that role. It just happened. People gravitated there when something mattered. Rhea was sketching again, but slower now. "If we're honest," she said, "today exposed the hardest truth so far." Eli looked up. "Say it." "We can't save time for people," Rhea said. "We can only share ours." Silence followed, not disagreement, recognition. A young man spoke next, someone who hadn't talked much since arriving weeks earlier. "When you leave," he said, choosing each word carefully, "my body thinks I'm being abandoned, even if my mind knows better." No one rushed to respond. "That's not weakness," Lena finally said. "That's memory." Jonah leaned forward. "Then we adjust again. Not by staying forever, but by making leaving predictable." "How?" the young man asked. Jonah answered plainly. "We tell you exactly when we'll be gone. We tell you when we'll return, and we don't change it." The group nodded slowly. Reliability wasn't dramatic, but it was revolutionary. Before sunrise, plans shifted, not broad strategies, specific calendars, names attached to days, mentors rotating in overlapping pairs so no one vanished all at once. Absence turned into something safe because it was explained in advance. By morning, the ranch felt tighter, more intentional. Midday brought tension. A disagreement broke out over resource allocation, 2 communities requesting in-person help at the same time. Voices stayed calm, but stakes were real. "We can't split people," someone argued. "And we can't ignore urgency," another replied. Jonah listened until both sides finished. Then he asked one question: "Which place collapses without us today?" They reviewed the facts, not emotions, not promises, facts. The answer was clear. Decision made. No resentment followed. The system held. That afternoon, Jonah walked with Nora through the garden paths. She was quiet longer than usual. "What are you thinking?" he asked. She hesitated. "If this works, why wasn't it done before?" Jonah stopped walking. "Because it requires something most systems refuse to give." "What?" "Time without control." She considered that, then nodded. As evening approached, a vehicle pulled in unexpectedly. Dust hung in the air as it stopped. A woman stepped out, visibly shaken. "I drove all night," she said. "They said you don't promise miracles, just structure." Jonah didn't smile. He gestured toward the hall. "Sit with us. Eat first." She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for years. Dinner stretched longer than planned. Stories came out raw and unpolished. No one fixed anything. They listened. Later, as the fire burned low, the woman whispered, "If I stay, will someone walk with me every day?" Lena answered without hesitation, "Yes, until you don't need us to." That night ended not with certainty, but with something better: commitment. No time jumped. No chapter closed. Everyone went to sleep knowing exactly what Zman or what tomorrow would require of them. And that, finally, felt like wealth.